Hello and welcome to the Wholistically PsycEd podcast. I'm your host, Mariah Choate, a nationally certified school psychologist turned stay-at-home mom who now has the freedom to share what school districts don't want you to know after spending over a decade in the field of education. My goal is to help you learn all you need to know about special education that districts often gatekeep. Each episode will dive into how commonly laws are blatantly broken and tips on leveraging special education law to support best practice for students and teachers alike. We'll also feature interviews with parents and educators who are navigating these challenges head-on, along with those who are making strides to improve this broken system. This channel is for you, parents of students with suspected or diagnosed disabilities who already have or might need individualized education plans or 504 plans. It's also for teachers, counselors, and fellow school psychologists who are feeling the strain of a system that often leaves us feeling burnt out and overwhelmed. So if you're ready to learn, advocate, and empower yourself, child, or students, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Wholistically PsycEd podcast. Today we're tackling a controversial yet very real issue in public schools. When administrators and general education teachers remove students with behavioral needs from their classroom and place them in special education settings without an IEP team decision. If you're an educator, advocate, or parent, you need to hear this because this isn't just unethical, it's actually illegal. And I've seen it happen firsthand. Let me first share a story that still frustrates me to this day. A first grade student walked into school for the very first time. Due to the pandemic, he had never been in a structured school environment before. His mother shared that he had an autism diagnosis, but there was no assessment plan in place, no IEP, and no formal support outlined for him. It was only a couple days of school for him, and his teacher and administrators were already overwhelmed. I get it. It was hard. It took collaboration between myself, the school psychologist, the school counselor, a counseling intern, his general education teacher, both administrators, the principal and the assistant principal, and his mother to help him transition. But what did the administrator end up doing? Well, she sent him to a self-contained special education classroom just to try it out. No meeting, no parent consent, no assessment, just a decision made out of frustration. When I pulled the admin to the side and said, the law doesn't allow this, a disability must be identified, least restrictive environment, LRE, must be considered, and his parent also has the right to be informed. Their response totally shocked me. They genuinely did not know. They were following a practice that had worked before for them. And this is the systemic failure. Districts keep their own teams in the dark about special education laws and processes. So what happened next? Well, we did what we should have done from the start. We put a support plan in place, conducted a full special education assessment, and guess what? He actually thrived in general education with resource support. He made so much progress that the IEP team determined he actually should stay in the general education setting, the very environment he was almost removed from without due process. So why does this happen? This situation is so much more common than people realize. And no, I don't believe the administrators or the teachers were acting out of malice at all. I believe burnout leads to a lack of creativity and problem solving, and people jump to what has worked well in the past. Districts intentionally do not provide adequate training on special education laws and processes. This leads to knee-jerk decision-making, where behavioral challenges are met with removal rather than actual support for the team and the student. But let's be clear. Removing a student from their general education classroom without an IEP decision violates federal law under IDEA. It totally disregards LRE, totally disregards parental rights, and it doesn't allow a proper assessment process to take place. So now let's talk about what should be done when a student with behavioral challenges enters the classroom, especially if they don't have an IEP yet. Let's talk about a step-by-step plan. Number 1, you already know it, collect baseline data. Observe the student's behavior and identify patterns. What triggers the behavior? When do they happen the most often? How severe is it? How frequently is it happening? Number 2, implement Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports. Before jumping to special education, utilize classroom-based interventions such as sensory breaks, visual schedules, and positive reinforcement strategies. This is specifically for a student that has yet to have a diagnosis. So in the example that I shared, that student, the mom shared, had a diagnosis already. So we were already in child find. already in the process of putting an assessment plan forward. We just hadn't gotten the actual assessment plan out yet before the admin actually removed the student and brought him to a different class. But for the Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports, this is especially important for students that do not have any medical diagnosis yet. I should also note that in the Tier 1 and Tier 2 supports, this is where a behavior support plan can be put in place. Now, if you know the intricacies of behavior, you should know that if a student with behavioral challenges who has an IEP is having difficulty and the team has tried different behavior goals and it's not working, they might move on to an FBA, functional behavior assessment, to determine the function of the behavior. And then they create a behavior intervention plan, or BIP. Other states, other districts might call it something similar, but it's essentially a plan of action to help prevent the escalation of that specific behavior and instead replace it by meeting the need of the student, by meeting the function that the student is seeking, aka meeting their needs, by a more socially appropriate behavior rather than them escalating to the quote-unquote problem behavior. So the team would essentially put that together after collecting data, but this same support is also available for general education students, and it would involve a team such as the school psychologist, the school counselor, maybe a counseling intern if a school counselor is busy, and the general education teachers involved, and parents as well. And essentially it's creating a similar plan, just not as rigorous. You might not have as in-depth of data, but you are creating somewhat of a game plan to help support the student before there's any escalations of behavior. Now, just as a school psychologist who was a part of these meetings a lot, this would happen through the SST, or student study team process, where people are coming together in those meetings, trying to brainstorm how to support. Okay, how can we, if this student is feeling overwhelmed in class, these are the things that they can do. They can take a break. They can go visit the counselor. They can take a walk with a paraeducator. There's all these different supports and things that you can put in place for the student. It really depends on the SST team, and it depends on, the creativity that they can have for those supports. But that would be under this step. Number 3, involve the parent as soon as possible. Have an open discussion with the student's parent or guardian about what they've seen at home, what strategies may help, what has helped in the past, maybe in their past schools, previous teachers, things like that. Number 4, develop a temporary support plan. So even before the BSP happens, while this assessment process is happening, either for special education or for this BSP that I talked about, you should be creating an individualized support plan using general education strategies, maybe a check-in, check-out system, maybe social emotional learning strategies, maybe movement breaks, things like that. Just documenting everything that you're trying and then documenting the response of the child in that process. That's all the documentation process leading up to the BSP. Number 5, initiate that assessment process if needed. So if the student's needs require more support than what general education interventions can provide, you find that it's not successful, it's not helping, maybe it's getting worse, then you can initiate the special education assessment process with parent consent, obviously, of providing an assessment plan, discussing it with the SST team. This is where the school psychologist during the SST team would say, okay, you know what? I noticed that Johnny is displaying a lot of these difficulties with transition, and he's doing a lot of hand flapping, and he's having difficulty with social interactions, and he always tries to isolate, and he's having a difficult time understanding communication. Maybe let's see if we can do an assessment for autism if there's concerns of that with his teacher and parent and we see it observed. But I will do a little caveat. The best plan of action for this assessment process is for everyone to be aware not only of the disabilities that are categorized under the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, but it would be helpful for people to be well informed on what the criteria specifically is for what would qualify a student for an IEP or not. And this is what, if you know my Instagram at all, this is what I write home about all the time. Parents, educators, everyone in the schools should be well aware of what the disability categories are, what those specific quote unquote symptoms or observations would be of a child, even before they get diagnosed or even before they qualify for an IEP. It just helps everyone be aware when you're taking that data and making those data-driven decisions. It helps everyone on the team be on the same page of, yeah, I observed this as well. And oh, okay, it coincides with what mom is saying at home, or the school psychologist says about what could be a potential disability that would qualify for an IEP, things like that. And it also helps along this assessment process. All the data is in hopes of helping support the child anyways. So don't think of it as like a wait and see type approach. This really should be an intentional, data-driven decision-making process. Number 6, monitor and adjust. So behavior plans, whether it's a BSP or a BIP for special education, whether it's the teacher just implementing strategies with a student, whatever it is, it should always be fluid with constant monitoring and adapting. This ensures that the student is receiving the right level of support in their current environment before considering a more restrictive placement, like switching them to a different teacher or switching them to a mild, moderate SDC or a special day class instead of keeping them in their general education, for example. At the end of the day, special education is not a dumping ground for students who struggle with behavior. It's a federally protected service designed to meet individual needs. And general education teachers and administrators must be informed of the laws so they don't unknowingly violate student rights. If you're a parent, ask questions. If you're an educator, advocate for proper procedure. And if you're an administrator, get the training you actually deserve so you can make the right calls for students and families. And as always, you can find all of these supports in my 2 best-selling guides. It's my IEP guide for parents and teachers. That's where we discuss all the eligibility criteria for every single category under IDEA. I also provide case law specifics on confusing things that might occur in the school setting or things that the team might try to disagree with parents on. And just it helps educators and parents both have full knowledge when they're coming to the IEP team and being able to advocate well for their students' rights. And then the second best-selling guide is my behavior guide. That's where you get a full breakdown of all the functions of behavior, how to understand them, notice them, observe them, track data on them. And then I also provide all of my examples. So I have a BSP example for general education students, a BIP example for special education students, and I even have an FBA or functional behavior assessment example report. And that's for everyone to have a better understanding on what would be included in a legally defensible report. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let's continue to have these difficult conversations because our kids deserve better. Until next time, take care and keep advocating. Thanks so much for joining me today. I would be so grateful if you could share this with anyone you can think of who works in education or happens to have a child with disabilities. If this was helpful for you, make sure to subscribe so you can hear some of the crazy and amazing stories of what is really going on behind the scenes in public education. Until next time, remember, in the famous words of Maya Angelou, each child belongs to all of us, and they bring us a tomorrow in direct relation to the responsibility we have shown to them.